and it's great to be here with all of you tonight. We're also connecting with people who are not here in the room, so the event's being live streamed. And the sort of broad format of the evening is that many of you have submitted questions in advance. We've chosen I've chosen those questions. Andy doesn't know what the questions are, and I think some of you are poised and ready to ask those questions. We've grouped them broadly into themes, so there's going to be questions on housing and homelessness first. We're going to do transport and clean air, the environment, child poverty and Gaza. So those are sort of main themes, but hopefully there'll also be time for you to chip in on other topics. We're going to spend 10 to 15 minutes on each of those topics. It's kind of your night to ask the questions, so we will try and get through as many people as possible. If you want to ask a supplementary question, put your hand up, and if we've got time, we'll send somebody around with a microphone. I just want to introduce the other VIPs in the room. The Deputy Mayor for Police, Crime, Justice and Fire, Kate Green, is here somewhere. Oh, she's on the front row, there we go. We've also got senior representatives from Greater Manchester Police, Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service, and from Salford Council, as well as Transport for Greater Manchester. So you might find that Andy might call on them to supplement his answers. Now I've got a tough one. Yeah. I've got a tablet here on my knee. I'm not being rude looking at it. I'm just seeing if there's been any questions coming in from social media via the hashtag AskAndyGM. So those of you watching at home, that's the hashtag you need to use if you want to be found. I'm sure you don't all need telling this, but please be polite, be respectful, listen to one another, no heckling. If anybody asks a question that's not really a question and it's more of a statement, I will cut you off because it's supposed to be questions and not kind of grandstanding. But I think it's going to be a really interesting evening, and I think we'll get going straight away. All right.
Thanks to you for doing it. Thanks everyone for coming out on a cold night, and thanks Hemsley House, by the way. I must have been past thousands of times and never been in, so glad to come in at last.
Okay, so the first question is Darren Matthews here? Yeah. Yep. We need to get a microphone to you and then ask your question to the Mayor.
Thank you. What efforts are you making to increase the availability of affordable and social housing in Greater Manchester?
So we have a plan for 30,000 council homes or homes for social rent that we are asking for government support to build. I've just set up a land commission, and that is a body that is basically public sector bodies, Church of England as well, but mainly public sector bodies, to try and find brownfield across the city region that, Network Rail or, prison service or other bodies are sitting on that we could free up, because that's the type of location that is obviously best for us to use, because we don't have the land costs, etc. And then that makes it possible to build social housing. So we have a plan for it. At the moment, as you'll know, it's not easy for councils or combined authorities like the one I lead to build social housing. But we are beginning to do it. We're doing it in small numbers at the moment. There's a GMP site, ex-GMP site. Have you vacated it, Terry, now on Chester Road? Yeah. So that's an example of what we're trying to do. We're taking ex-public sector-owned sites and then bringing them forward for housing, but with some social housing on it, because of the kind of the cost of the land allows us to do that. But it's challenging, and if there's a change of government, whoever that change of government is, we will absolutely be pitching hard to say, you cannot solve the housing crisis without building council housing and social housing in tens of thousands. And even 30,000 probably isn't enough. But it's all we feel realistically we can make a plan to do at this moment in time.
Thanks very much. Yep. Great question. Lots of people ask similar questions, so hopefully a few others have had their questions answered in that one. Next, we're going to go to James Miles. I'm very intrigued about your degree, James, for reasons will become clear when you ask your question.
Thank you. So I have recently graduated with a comedy degree from the University of Salford.
Comedy?
And have been working with Launch.
You've got to tell us a joke, though. You can't just say that and then not... Yeah.
I'll leave it to the end. So, yeah, I've been working with Launch and the Growth Company to start a comedy company. I know many other recent graduates in the creative and other sectors who wish to remain within the Greater Manchester region but struggle to do so because of lack of a credit history, full-time employment, and the fact that if 3 or more people wish to live together, which we often have to for costs, the landlord must make the property HMO compliant. What can the GMCA do to make it easier for graduates to live, work and contribute to Greater Manchester? And would they consider working with universities and developers to create graduate-only accommodation in a similar vein to having student-only ones?
Yeah, I love that idea, actually. And I've been talking for a while, actually, about a graduate retention strategy for Greater Manchester. And if we could make sort of housing available on a preferential basis, perhaps working with some of the big employers who obviously are very keen for you and many of your colleagues to stay, then we should. I mean, obviously, we've got to make sure, though, it's not preferential, and then we can't then support people who need housing elsewhere. But I think the idea of it is a good one, in that the benefits, obviously, of having so many graduates in the city, that brings lots of benefits for people, but it's often very, very hard for people to afford to stay straight after graduation. So it's not just housing. I'm looking at whether I could do an 18 to 21 or even older offer on public transport on the B network. Again, that might give people an incentive to stay. So anyone who studied here might get an extra year, let's say, of grace to sort of help in that. It's that difficult year, isn't it, where you're just kind of making the transition from student life to work life. So I am bringing forward a graduate retention strategy, and as part of that, I will be keen to look at whether there's options with big graduate employers or others to look at whether there's any housing options that we could bring forward. But in principle, if we could, we would. Great degree, by the way. And when you say you're set up a clown operation, I thought you were going to make a comment about the Greater Manchester Combined Authority then for a second, but you didn't. So that was very kind of you.
Let's do a couple of more questions on housing. I think it's such an important issue. I'm not sure if did the person who asked about Airbnbs, are they here? Do you want to ask the question yourself? I can ask it for you if you like, because I've got it written down. Yeah. Okay. Andy, why are there no restrictions on the number of HMO, so houses of multiple occupancy, and Airbnbs in Salford, which are reducing the number of homes to rent and buy to unacceptable levels?
Good question. Do you mind if I just say something? Why did you ask the question, just so I can understand a little?
It's being taken over by
Okay.
and people are having to move out. There's nowhere to buy or rent anymore.
Which area?
Earlhams of the Height.
Okay. Yeah, I know it well. Well, it's very hard for councils to put that type of restriction on, to be honest, at the moment. The planning laws are quite permissive in that respect. Landlords are able to, there has to be a kind of very significant reason as to why a council wouldn't allow an HMO license. So it's not easy for councils to limit that in the way that they would want to. What we are arguing for, though, is much stronger and tougher landlord regulation in the city region. So I don't know if you know, but we're bringing through a good landlord charter. The City Mayor of Salford has been a big player behind it, Paul Dennett. We've gone out for public consultation on it. We want to establish the principle of landlord regulation much tougher than it is at the moment. As part of that, I think we should argue for that ability for our councils to limit the number of properties. I think we should require companies like Airbnb to adhere to much higher standards than they often do in terms of the behaviour of some of the tenants who rent out properties, because we have some real issues with that across Greater Manchester. So I think what you're pushing towards is something we would support, which is much tougher regulation of the private rented sector, and that would include homes for multiple occupancy.
Excellent. Does anybody want to ask a quick question on housing or homelessness before we move on? Lady at the front, in the Adidas.
Right. I'd like to ask specifically about youth homelessness.
Yeah.
So I've been working in Salford for about 14 years in supported accommodation with young people. Right. It's growing.
Yeah.
It's a big problem. There's a lot of hidden homelessness as well in the city. And supported accommodation now really is kind of bed blocked really because of lack of affordable housing for move on.
Yeah.
So that means that 16, 17-year-olds that are becoming homeless or leaving care,
Yeah.
they can't move in. And so they're then being put in external placements at an additional cost to the council.
Yeah.
And this is becoming a massive growing problem.
Yeah.
And the lack of cross-directorate collaboration between different departments, I think, is that, you know, that would be a potential solution as well.
Well, really important point. Well done for what you do, by the way. I mean, I look at what goes on in Salford City Council with relation to what you try and do to support people with housing. And I think you're absolutely up there as one of our sort of exemplar councils. You do a brilliant job in really tough circumstances. And I think the commitment comes from the top with Paul, but, you know, there is a commitment to deal with these things in the right way. I think it goes back to what I said at the start. There's no solution to any of this without building homes for social rent, and homes of all sizes, you know, of all levels of, you know, bedroom sizes. We just need a complete change, don't we, in relation to the philosophy about that. You know, whenever you hear politicians at a national level, they always say, "Well, build X many thousand homes." They're not talking about homes for social rent, are they? Council homes. And you know, how much longer can we talk about a housing crisis as a country without actually facing up to what is the problem? And here's something that's sometimes not popular even with people on my own side, but I'm going to say it. We should stop Right to Buy now, because that just makes the problem. You know, we are still net losing social homes every year because of it. I mean, when are we going to, like, it's almost like we're in a housing crisis where no one ever sort of actually says, this is how you stop it getting worse and this is how you actually build your way out of it. So you know, for me, I've come to really regard housing policy as something that is, you know, is fundamentally undermining our efforts, if you like, to improve the city region on so many ways. And it's why we've gone out for consultation on this good landlord charter. It's why we're going to give residents the right to request a property check. So if your landlord won't join the good landlord charter and start to kind of play by the right kind of way, we're going to give residents the right to request a check. And if the property is not found to be being maintained to the right standard, then there can be enforcement action taken. We're just trying to get a handle on, you know, what is currently, I would say, one of the biggest challenges facing the city region, which is housing in all of its different ways. There's got to be a multiple kind of solution, isn't there? No one thing solves it. Building more council homes, more regulation of the private rented sector, including the HMO issue that was just raised behind you. It's going to take a couple of generations to do it.
One last question. I think the chap at the back was first, yeah, with glasses on. And then we'll move on to transport next, I think.
Yeah, so we sit opposite the Salford University here, and I work in student unions. Andy, we meet on a semi-regular basis.
Yep.
I'm just wondering, what is your kind of strategy to work with the universities and the student unions to develop student housing, to more student housing and cheaper student housing as well?
Yeah, that's become more of a problem, hasn't it, with the success of the universities in GM. And you know, when the fire happened in Bolton, I think the last time we met, I mentioned this. That was a real shock for me.
What the fire was.
Do people remember the Cube fire? It was in December 2019, and it was appalling. It was one Friday night, and the flames literally just licked up the side of a building. The thing melted, didn't it? And the next day we went there. I mean, Ben is here from Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service, or at the back of the room, but also Sarah as well. I don't know if either of you want to add to this. That building could not have been constructed in a more dangerous way. It was cladding with like a shaft between the cladding and then a timber frame, and it just went up like a tinderbox. And it was the students that got everybody out. You know, if it wasn't for them, you know, there'd have been a much more serious situation. The shock I got wasn't just the way after Grenfell that building went up. The shock was you kind of feel there'd be a relationship between Bolton University and that housing provider, because that housing provider is obviously solely selling that place on the back of people studying at Bolton. It was a shock to find there was no relation, and they didn't approve of them. And to me, that said something to me about how the universities need to be given, as part of the Good Landlord Charter, we need to change fundamentally, I think, the way the relationship universities have to approved blocks, the standards that they're operating to, and of course the quantity of properties they've got, rooms they've got for students. So the whole area, I think, needs a real good look. If you look in other parts of the private rented sector, sometimes it can be some of the poorest quality housing in GM that students are in. It can often be a landlord that really doesn't honour basic commitments to people. I'm not saying all landlords are bad by any means, or even all student landlords are bad by any means, but there are some bad players out there that need to be dealt with. I'm still open to a pilot under the Good Landlord Charter with one of the universities to take a particular look at student accommodation. So if the Greater Manchester Students' Assembly are up for that, I am up for it as well.
Great. I know there was a few people extra wanted to ask questions. If we've got time, we'll come back to them at the end, but I think it's important we move on to the next topic. So transport. Carlos Dorr, are you here? Let me get a microphone to you so you can ask your question.
Due to the cost of living increase, this has made travelling very difficult within people in my local community. Can we look at making public transport free for 11 to 16-year-olds?
We can look at it. I'm not going to avoid the question. I'll come back to it for sure. We can definitely look at it. And I do look at all of these. I do look at all of these things. So just to start with what we have done, and then we can talk about what you'd like us to do more. So I introduced the cap on bus fares. And by the way, we were the first to propose it here. So currently, bus travel is £2 cap on an adult single journey, £1 on a child journey. Any bus day travel is £5 cap for an adult, £2.50 for a child. So 11 to 16 is £2.50 for any unlimited bus travel per day. And I've committed to keeping that all year. So that will be in place for all of 2024. Beyond that, I've asked the team, and got Alex from TFGM here tonight who can say more, but I asked the team to look at a family ticket. And what we've done is we've brought through a new family ticket on the B network, which is £9. It's not every day, by the way. So it's a bank holiday weekend product, but it's £9 for 2 adults and 3 kids, unlimited travel, and that's not bad. That's a pretty good deal. Again, trying to help people with the cost of living crisis. Obviously, 16 to 18s get the R Pass, which is free. And I'm just going to be honest with you as to why I made that bit free. Because obviously when kids get to that age, they often have to travel further afield for a college place or, a job or an apprenticeship, whatever it might be. And in my mind, I'm just thinking back to my own youth, my first job was in Middleton, working on the Middleton Guardian, and I lived in the Lee area. And the cost of travel made me have to stop doing that in the end. And I've always had this thing about that. When you're 16, no considerations of money or your parents' income should be stopping you from trying to get on, should they? So the R-Pass is something I'm really proud about. And I funded that through our own funds in Greater Manchester. And it's hard to sustain it because it's not easy, but we're completely committed to it. So all of that makes it tough, if you know what I mean, to go further. If I could, I would, and I mean that when I say that to you, I would like to reduce the cost of public transport in Greater Manchester to as low level as we possibly could. And for young people, if I could make it free, I would make it free. Because it's about life, isn't it? And getting on and, opportunity, isn't it? But I've done the best I can with colleagues at TFGM in the circumstances that we're in. But I'm always open to seeing if we could go further. We have given the R Pass, which is the free bus pass, to young people. Who obviously mention was just made of young people in care or leaving care. So we've said that they can have the R Pass up to 21. If I was to go immediately to a sort of another offer, if I'm honest, it would be for carers, because we don't have a carers pass in GM, and I think we should. For people who go out with somebody where they need to travel together, I think we should do that. But you're making a fair point, and I would like to do that if I possibly could. But we don't get the revenue that London gets, is just the honest answer. We struggle to do it. However, just lastly, having put the buses back under public control, because yours are under public control. Most people who live in the room are in the B network, and we can get onto some of the B network issues if people want to. The thing about that is, and obviously we're 4 months into that, but when you kind of go through the process of taking a system that is basically put profit first, if we're honest, the old deregulated system, what you find is the B network immediately means that any up sort of side on the fare box, because we now control that fare box, it comes back into keeping the fares down. In the old days, it went out in terms of profits and share and dividends. Now that money recirculates in the B network and it comes back to fares. And the more that people use the buses, the more I can move in the direction you're wanting me to go. Because that money just increase usage, more money in the system, more money to keep fares low, and then you get a really positive sort of virtuous circle going, really. So, yeah, I'm not trying to avoid the question. I can't at the moment is the simple answer. The funds wouldn't allow it. I'd be storing up a big black hole in our finances, which I can't do at this moment in time. But do I want to go in the direction you're asking me to? Definitely.
Just in a dream world, would you love to be like Luxembourg, which has made all public transport free?
I think there would be so many benefits from a policy of that kind. You know, if you kind of think about it as a way of supporting people through public support, because the more that people use public transport, it's better for health reasons, environment reasons, economic reasons. You're helping more and more people connect to opportunity. Transport costs shouldn't be a barrier, should they? Whether you go completely free, I don't know. There's an argument to be had about that. But I look at Germany, where they've just made a rail. So in Germany, you pay €49 a month, I think I'm right, and you get unlimited regional rail travel. So for us, that would be unlimited Northern and Transpennine. It wouldn't be Avanti. But is Avanti worth your €49 a month? I don't know. But so you think about that. What's that? Sort of £1.60 a day or something for unlimited train travel. Those are good. I think those are good policies, personally, because you're just helping people. You're lowering the cost of living for people. You're connecting them to jobs and training and opportunity. And actually, social isolation, you're helping people get out and meet people, aren't you? So, yeah, we should be definitely, as long as I'm there, we are definitely going to have a low-fare public transport system as much as we can sustain it.
Great. We've got a question now from Edward Oliver, who's not here, but this is his question. It's about HS2. HS2 was cancelled by the Prime Minister for the sections north of Birmingham. Have you considered an alternative route from north of Crewe, which HS2 would connect with Greater Manchester, the North West and Scotland at a far less expensive cost?
Yeah, people may have seen, I'm working with the Mayor of the West Midlands on this very issue.
Andy.
Pardon?
The other Andy.
The other Andy Street. Just a word about it, though. Has anyone kind of calmed down about the fact that they came here, didn't talk to us, having promised us HS2 10 years ago when George Osborne did his Northern Powerhouse speech, and then just like ripped it up and, honestly, I don't think we'll ever see anything as audacious and disgraceful, really, as that, in my view. I just think it says everything that's wrong about politics in this country, doesn't it? To me, it does anyway. This thing that, something they promised you 10 years ago, you work in good faith. I mean, Alex will tell you, there are people in TFGM who've worked on that solidly for a decade. Literally to have their work just completely just...
But yeah, if you ask many people in Greater Manchester, they probably thought it was a waste of money. I mean, out of interest, show of hands here, who thought that HS2 was a good idea? Is that 2/3, do you reckon?
About that.
Okay.
Anyone who didn't? That's fair enough.
Yeah, who was against it?
Yeah.
A few people. Because did you think it was too much money for not enough benefit?
Yeah. No, I get that. I mean, actually, before we were getting rumours of the decision, and before they made it, myself and the leader of Manchester City Council, Bev Craig, we wrote to the government saying, talk to us. We would be prepared to prioritise Liverpool, Warrington, Manchester, Leeds first, and we'd be open to different ways of doing HS2, but obviously they just didn't do that. And the biggest sort of insult was they said, we've got this new plan, it's called Network North. Well, it wasn't a network and it wasn't in the north. They ended up sort of like, they boasted that they were spending the money saved from HS2 on potholes in London. I mean, it was just, anyway.
They were going to build the tram link to Manchester Airport, weren't they?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it shows how much they
10
knew
years
about
ago.
the place that they were in. Anyway, it says a lot about what's wrong with politics.
Yeah, so
but
tell
let's
us
leave that
briefly
there.
your new plan.
So briefly, to be fair to him, Andy Street deserves credit because he said he got a chance to speak to the Prime Minister before he took that appalling sort of decision and got a commitment that we could look at alternatives. And we had a meeting in Birmingham. I was in Birmingham with him yesterday. There's a private sector consortium who've given all of their time for free to try and help us come up with alternatives to keep it alive. Just think of it this way. I understand why people may not have been convinced by HS2, and it was gold-plated, let's be honest about that. It was all about these two ridiculous speeds, and that created cost in the infrastructure that it should have been done differently. It should have been built in the north first, by the way. That was another thing that should have been done differently. But we think there is a way in which we can do this. If they don't do anything between Birmingham and Manchester, here's the maddest thing in the world, and this was in a report from the Public Accounts Committee yesterday. You won't even believe this could be possible. Rail services out of Piccadilly will actually get worse when HS2 opens to Birmingham because we will only be able to have the short trains that come up on HS2, 200-metre trains. That will mean there's fewer seats available, and they'll have to go at lower speeds because they're not the tilting things like the Pendolinos. They can't tilt. So we fewer seats, slower speeds. I mean, after everything they've promised us, they end up with worse train services. So the point is, you've got to have an alternative solution for Birmingham to Manchester, and we've been presented with evidence that we think it can be done. This was always the cheapest bit of the line on HS2 because there's no tunnelling needed. When you're coming through the top of Birmingham, you're going into sort of Staffordshire and Cheshire. It's all above ground. There's not a tunnelling issue. So it's a much cheaper part of the system. And actually, it was the bit that made most economic sense because the M6 is full, the West Coast Main Line is full, more capacity is needed between Birmingham and Manchester.
And this will be funded by private companies?
Well, these are the options, these are the things that we're looking at the moment. Apparently, the TGV in France has just been extended between Bordeaux and Tours, fully privately funded. But the deal is there's then a sort of annual charge to the people who built it.
Like a PFI sort of thing?
Well, I said that, but they said it's not because it's not about a complicated public. It's a much simpler model of there's just a set fee that you pay and there's no extra sort of. Anyway, so I did ask that question.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we've got to look at alternatives, haven't we? Because to end up with a worse, just saddling our kids, all of us in this room, with their worst railways. This place gave railways to the world in the 19th century. And we're saying it's going to go worse in the 21st century. What does that say about the country, let alone the government that we've got? I mean, it's just an unbelievable state of affairs. So we're really on with it, and I'm actually quite encouraged about where it's going.
And will Labour commit to it, do you think, your plan? If
Well, I hope so.
Labour wins the general election.
The work's going to be done next month. I was speaking to the leader of the Labour Party today, and I said, can we present this to you as soon as it's finished? And he said, yeah, and there's a commitment there to look at it. There's a full commitment from Labour to Northern Powerhouse Rail. I think probably we can all agree that a new East-West line is the highest priority. And myself and the Mayor of Liverpool, we've kind of agreed on the route for that line. So we're making progress on that. So it's frustrating. It is frustrating dealing with the way Whitehall and Westminster work. And that decision on HS2, it was like tier 3. They just think they can treat us differently than they treat London, don't they? That's what they do. They just think they can do things here that they'd never dare do in London. And we've just got to keep calling that out every time they do it until they stop.
Get a clap, right. Okay, the next question straddles transport and health. Is Owen Farnworth here? Owen, wait for the microphone to come to you.
Recent figures have shown Salford has one of the lowest life expectancies in the country, and air pollution plays a part in this. What is your current plan to deal with this after the clean air zone policy was abandoned? Yeah,
it's a fair question. The answer is the B network. That's the answer, honestly. Low-cost public transport is the answer. We are moving very quickly now to electrify all buses in Greater Manchester. I have been given assurance. Alex, tell me if you're going to say anything otherwise. We could have a completely electric fleet by the end of this decade. So that's given the pace of change, because when we control the system, we can control the change in the buses on the road. We couldn't do that in the deregulated system, but we can now. And we're bringing through a lot of electric buses. You know, we brought 50 into service in your area. Well, we've got an issue with the delivery at the moment, but we're going to bring 50 more in a few months into Rochdale and Oldham. To me, that is the best way to do it. And there's a bigger point here about net zero, and we can have a debate about this. But through that debate about the clean air zone, I'd had this kind of worry anyway about the public not buying into it, because and I understand why they do perceive it this way, that everything's about charges, taxes, bans, restrictions. Do you know what I mean? And people then sort of say, well, they kind of almost turn against it, because the problem with the clean air zone, that the government, they forced that straitjacket on us, and they forced us down the road of a charging clean air zone. Whatever anyone says, that is what they did. The problem with that approach is when you're going to charge people for a vehicle that's not compliant, the problem with it is it's always going to hit the poorest hardest. The people who will struggle most to get the money together to change their vehicle will always be hit hardest in a system like that. So together we really did say, no, this isn't the way to do it. To me, the best way to net zero is give people positive reasons to make the change that you would like them to make, i.e. better public transport with lower fares. You know, that is a way you kind of carry people with you to net zero, or, you know, incentives to retrofit their homes so they get lower bills in their home because they've taken the incentive to retrofit the home. That, for me, is the learning point. You know, you've got to give people carrots towards net zero rather than whacking them with a big stick towards net zero. Because the problem with it is there's two ways to get there, isn't it? You could get there, but we could become an even more unequal society as a result, because you've battered people on the lowest incomes the most. And is that the way Greater Manchester would want to get to a net zero city region? Definitely not. We want to get there with a more equal city region at the end of it. Sorry, you want to?
Don't you think sticks sometimes work? I mean, less people smoke now, and one of the reasons is cigarettes are so expensive. I don't park near my office on Deansgate anymore because it's £35 a day, so I get the train. So it can work, can't it? Are you just shying away from doing something difficult and penalising people?
The only way I would say they work when you give people genuine alternatives. So you kind of say, right, the stick's here, but we have actually created this for you to use instead. And the truth is, London have got that, but we haven't. You know, we're still in the process of building a decent transport service. And if we were to, you know, some people in Greater Manchester, not just some, a lot of people, to get to work early or to come home late from work, they are not in a position that they can use anything other than their car or their van. And that is a difference because of the failure of successive governments to invest fairly in public transport here. And I just think, you know, we've got to be honest about that. And I think if we're going to carry people with us on this journey to net zero, which we should go on and we shouldn't back away from it, you've got to do it in a different way, I would say.
Go to that lady first, and then we'll take these two questions at once, if that's okay.
Course,
so we'll come to you after.
All I want to say with regards to net zero is we lack education. We need to educate more people in how to reduce their carbon outputs.
Yeah.
And it's that simple. A lot of people, it's such a huge problem. It seems overwhelming, there's too much to do. But if we give people an incentive and an education and find out what their values are, we will want to change. I'm quite passionate about this, and I've trialled it in apprenticeships, and apprentices know nothing. By the end of it, they're having an impact in their organisation.
Yeah.
They're making changes. We've got green jobs. Actually, every job should be green. Everyone should be educated on how to make changes. Simple changes. It doesn't have to be huge.
Yeah.
And if we can all do that and make a commitment and a pledge, then we will naturally start to reduce stuff. And then the big things that you're doing also.
Thank you.
Well, I
not
totally
a question,
agree.
but...
No, I just...
And then we'll go to this chap here.
Education and incentives, definitely. We've got something called the Carbon Literacy Project. Definitely supporting that. But you're right, just to stick on that incentives point. You know, we're not turning away from net zero, so, you know, don't think in any way we are. We think that is the way that this city region goes faster towards a place that is a better place to live. Because if you're improving people's transport, public transport, improving people's homes, making energy cheaper, more locally controlled, these are the things actually that we need to do. Better jobs that arise from some of the changes. But I think what I'm trying to say though is, that carries people with this, as opposed to sort of the resentment about you're banning this or you're taxing me for that. That the pace of change towards net zero won't be good enough if that's how the public perceive it.
Hi, Andy.
Hi,
what are you
good
doing
to see you, by the way.
The sort of bus times, like on Sundays, bank holidays, during school holidays, and general buses at every hour, for example, and then sort of services in Greater Manchester?
Thank you.
Good question. Thank you. So now we've got control of buses in this area. We're looking at all of those things, and we are, I promise you. And the B network isn't yet everything I want it to be, but we put figures out today. If you look on the B network app today on Acorn, I don't call it X. Do you call it X? Or,
No.
Anyway, whatever.
I don't use it anymore. It's wasted.
It's got weird under this bloke Musk, hasn't it? Anyway, never mind. Let's put that as on one side. We're confident the B network is now better than what it replaced. But is it good enough? No. And we would like more frequent services. We would like better services at weekends. Actually, I've been discussing with Alex and TFGM this week. We're going to bring forward a pilot this year for night buses in your area. So this part of Greater Manchester, most likely on the route that's just outside, we are looking at how we can institute a night bus service. Partly for the reasons I was just saying, Helen, around people who work late.
All night, would it? 24 hours
That's
a day?
what I would like. So this would run in the early hours, and it wouldn't be able to be probably more than an hourly service, but that's what we're looking at.
Quite mad that a region of 2.8 million people doesn't have any night buses.
Whether we used to have them, we did used to have them. Pardon?
Oh, here we go. Bus bingo.
Well, I'm gonna get out my old story about watching the Smiths over the road, which I did, by the way. But we got the bus. You could get a bus back to Lee. I mean, it was unbelievable that we've just gone backwards, haven't we?
Somebody did ask a question about bus to Lee.
I think you say the Smiths.
Please, can we have a regular direct bus from Lee to the Lowry and Media City?
Yeah, now that's the bit that we've got to. Now we've got control. What TFGM are going to do for us now is do a network review, because I wouldn't say all we've done. We've basically inherited the deregulated system, and we've made tweaks. It's fair to say we've added frequency into some services on the Lee guided busway. So the V1 and the V2, which comes past here, are more frequent now than they were when it was under the previous system. But what we're doing now is we're starting the first network review, and what is clear to me is that the system under the commercial operator in the old world was just sending buses into the centre. What it isn't good at doing is doing the sort of orbital connections around the city region. So there's a bus from Lee to the Trafford Centre, I think I'm right in saying, but it doesn't continue to Media City.
Well, you can put it on the
list. We will look at that.
Put it on the list.
Look at that.
We've got a question at the back there, and then we're going to move on to the next topic.
Hi. Just going back to the cars and the charging, was it a knee-jerk reaction for the GMCA to actually put the cameras up, put the signage up, do everything like that? Then the public spoke, and it was like, oh my God, they don't want it. And another thing is, the cameras are still there, the signage is still there. What's happening with that data that the cameras are gathering? Because if it's not going anywhere, aren't GMCA really, what's the word I'm looking for? They're in violation of GDPR.
Okay, no, those are good questions. So the first part of that, was it a knee-jerk reaction? No is the answer to that. Let me just explain why. Obviously, this scheme was devised pre-pandemic. And to go back to a point I said before, the government, it wasn't me actually, I formally wasn't a decision maker in it. I know that sounds like a politician's answer, but it's true. There was a legal direction from the government on the 10 councils of Greater Manchester. And the legal direction said they had to ensure compliance by 2024. So the scheme had been developed pre-pandemic when vehicles were lower cost, because there was a big jump in the cost of vehicles through the pandemic because of the production problems that that we experienced. Basically, what happened was a scheme devised pre-pandemic, which, don't get me wrong, would have been difficult, became impossible in the post-pandemic period. And late 2021, my team are here and TFGM are here, they'll know, I started saying I'm getting very worried that this scheme is just not doable because of what it will do to people, particularly van drivers, actually. Bear in mind, we always excluded cars. They were never going to be in. HGVs were in. Well, transport companies, where that's their main business, there was a justification, in my view, for transport companies to have modern, compliant vehicles. The same would apply to bus companies, and we've been talking about that. The issue with the clean air zone in Greater Manchester became vans, for the reason I was giving before. People who, the van wasn't their primary thing. It wasn't their business to have a van often. It was a painter decorator, it was a plumber or something like that. That became the issue. Thousands of vans across Greater Manchester, and they couldn't get vans at reasonable cost. And what I did in late 21 is commission research on that, got proof that the cost of vans had gone right up and people couldn't get hold of them. And I went back to the government in early 2022 and said, we cannot, and we don't feel we will implement this clean air zone. We're calling for a change. And the public were protesting, but we'd already started that process because I understand that people woke up to how difficult this was going to be to people, but we'd already sort of sensed it ourselves. We went back to the government and we had a long protracted standoff with them, but in the end, a minister came up here and we renegotiated the legal direction to 2026. We held out for that date. The government tried to give us a 1-year delay in it, but we held out for 2026. Why? Because we wanted the full impact of the B network to be felt in terms of reducing pollution. And because will be fully franchised by January next year, buses are the biggest cause of polluted air in Greater Manchester, and we are going to clean that up. And we believe we can get to pretty much to compliance via the B network. So that is the answer to your question. We negotiated more time, and because of that can do it in a better way. But it's the straitjacket the government have put us in. Because if you look around the country, Bradford have got one, Newcastle have got one, Birmingham have got one, Bristol. They were all put in the same thing by the government. And I like to think that we've argued for something better. On the cameras, we've gone back to the government to say we now do not want a charging clean air zone. We want to do this as a non-charging zone, and we've now got the evidence, because of the progress the B network is making, to show that we can clean up the air via that route. And the truth is we're still waiting for them to come back to us to say whether they're going to accept what we're asking for. So we submitted that in December and we're still waiting. Now, I don't know what you'll all feel about this, but sorry, Helen, I know you want to carry on, but I just need to make this clear, because Terry's here, and Terry's Deputy Chief Constable Terry Wood is here, and we've talked about this at length. I want to keep the camera infrastructure, even though the signs come down and there's no longer going to be a clean air zone. Let me just explain why. We do not have the best infrastructure when it comes to ANPR, automatic number plate recognition. In fact, I think, Terry, if I'm right, we've got the worst in the country currently, one of the worst. We have, yeah, for a big city region like ours. And currently, obviously the data is legal at the moment, because the arrangements under which those cameras have gone up are legal at this moment in time. The cameras are being used for traffic control purposes by TFGM, because TFGM are the data controllers. But GMP are accessing that data when they are investigating crime. So they often will ask for data related to a certain period. I don't know if, Terry, you want to add to this, because I think people might be interested, because they know that there's a vehicle they're trying to trace, and that data has been important in solving murders, rapes, serious violence, a whole range of serious crime. The thing GMP can't do at the moment is access that data in real time. So if there's a car chase or a missing person situation, they can't do it because they have to make an application to TFGM, and it's after the event. And I'm just going to be honest with you, I would like GMP to be able to access those cameras in real time. because I think there's a very big public safety benefit that comes from that. So I would not want to see that camera infrastructure taken down. I think it is helpful from a traffic management point of view, but it's particularly helpful from a public safety point of view, policing point of view.
You got an answer there. Do you want to come in, Terry?
Yeah, just to hopefully complement what Andy's saying. So at the minute, we're only accessing the data for really serious crime. So as mentioned, murders, torture, etc., and it's when a crime's been committed. If we want to try and piece evidence together to prove who's done something, then we make an application and we have used it. ANPR, because I get asked this a lot actually, just so, and you might well understand what ANPR is, so forgive me if you do. But ANPR are cameras at the side of the road that read number plates, and what they don't do, it's not speed cameras and things like that. So the best example I'd give, and it's an extreme example in fairness, but I think it demonstrates, I'm not going to tell you where they all are because that would be, well, you wouldn't want me to, would you anyway? But at the minute, my old force was Lancashire. I came from Lancashire. Lancashire, the public there have a very, very robust, a lot of cameras for NPR. So here, it's different. We do have some, so you're not unprotected. But let's just say, worst case scenario, and this does happen, that there's a child abducted in Manchester City Centre. If you think of all those cameras that are up for the clean air zone at the minute, it's like a spider's web being put across Greater Manchester. We could instantaneously, if we've got the reg, identify where it is. I would suggest within a matter of minutes, actually, the numbers of cameras that are there. We can't do that at the minute. And the benefit of us being able to access is for those sorts of jobs, for, real serious stuff, isn't it? Child abduction, we could be on it straight away. At the minute, we don't have that capability. So we flood the area, we'll get the helicopter up, we'll do all those sorts of things. But just imagine that kid in the car. And the number of cameras that are out there, we at the minute don't lifetime monitor it because we can't. But to plug that into our infrastructure would mean a big impact on crime actually in Manchester. Because when things happen, your car gets stolen and you ring us, we could have it on the system straight away. We'd know where it would be pretty much instantaneously. There's a lot of sense in it. There's also opposing views to it, as with everything.
Civil liberty.
No, there are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it would need public debate, etc. But I think, and at the end of the day, we'll do what you give us, and we'll try and do as best job we can. There is a debate to be had, though, but there's a lot of sense in it, in my view.
Thanks so much. Great. Let's move on to the next topic.
Do you want to come back, the gentleman? Sorry, I just wondered. Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
It's just quickly, yeah, great. Who's want to use it, grand. But the GMCA funded it, so would the police pay for it?
No, we didn't, though. Actually, just to answer that particular question, we didn't pay for any of it. Not the signs, not the cameras, none of it. And this is the thing that the campaigners, they always try to blame us for everything. If we'd done it all, well, we would be paying for it, but we didn't. It wasn't. We were required to do it by a legal direction, and consequently, the government paid for everything, including the cameras. But now, if they agree with us that we're not going to a charging zone, which is what we're asking for, I will need permission to transfer the use of those cameras to what Terry's just said. And I promise you, I will come out to a public, because I appreciate what you just said, Helen. We will come out to a public consultation on that and explain it clearly as to why we're asking for that, and what the benefits we see are, and some people might see disbenefits. But that's honestly where we're up to.
Very interesting. Right, next topic, child poverty. Is Carmen here? Carmen Woodhope.
Hi, Carmen.
Wait for the microphone so that people on the stream can hear you.
Andy.
Hi, Carmen.
Child poverty is a huge concern. And as a supply teacher in Salford, I'm aware of the higher percentage of children on pupil premium. and how much it's growing year on year. In the North West, on average, 10 children in every classroom are currently growing up in poverty. But child poverty is not inevitable. It is a result of choices made by people with power. How do you intend to address the devastating consequences of child poverty and tackle the causes in Salford and Greater Manchester?
Can I ask you just what change you've seen in the school and what kind of things you're dealing with now? Do you just see like things you've never thought you'd see in your...
Yes.
Yeah.
So I retired 4 years ago. I worked in Salford schools full time as senior management, and I've worked in some of the really tough primary schools in Salford, in very family deprived areas. And then the pandemic happened, and I took some time out. That was kind of when I retired, and then I've gone back to teaching now. I work mainly in Salford, all the way down the Lancs, out past Agecroft and Walkden and Little Hulton. Really is the land that time forgot. The difference in the provision that children are getting in that end of Salford to even what used to be considered the really tough areas in Manchester, like Moss Side, Whalley Range, where I work, it's a different world. There is a lot of children who are coming into school visibly suffering from poverty. Something that I haven't seen since maybe when I started teaching 35 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's a growing concern. And the concern is as well that there's lots of children that are not getting the support they need. I know the pandemic had a great deal to do with that, but those support units, those external places that people could go to get support, they've just disappeared.
Yeah.
So teachers are now, and schools are now, teachers are bringing in bags of shoes, teachers are bringing in tins of food. Yeah. And it's going on a regular basis now, but there is a lot of poverty, and it's really worrying.
Thank you.
Well, it's hard to hear, isn't it? But it's just the reality, isn't it? And I hear it everywhere I go in Greater Manchester. It's heartbreaking, isn't it? And I'm sure that's why you're here and why you're asking the question. You know, because I was the MP for Lee, not far from here, you know, just down the Lancs, not far from the places you mentioned. And there's a place like Higher Falls, and probably not that different from Little Hulton. You know, I know the areas you're talking about. When the first food banks appeared in sort of 2011, 12, I remember thinking at the time, well, this will be like a 2-year or a 3-year thing. Did everyone think that? A few people nodding, you know, and then we'll kind of, you know, obviously some others maybe saw what was underneath it all. But to think now where we are, and I look around Greater Manchester, we've got a voluntary welfare state. Teachers doing what you just described, you know, closed banks, you name it, banks, warm banks, data bank, you know.
Pet bank, pet food banks.
Everything, you know, it's just, and it's people's generosity that's kind of keeping communities afloat, isn't it? That we're lucky to live in a place, a part of the world that is just full of decent, generous people. But imagine if they weren't there. Well, I think people are struggling to keep supporting each other, aren't they? But thank God for the kind of warmth of our communities that people have done that. But it
what
does
are you going to do?
terrify me. It's a good point. I mean, so we are trying to do what we mentioned the cost of transport. I pay out of my budget. I mean, obviously I fund a bed every night, which is our homeless. It's not direct to the child poverty issues you're raising, but we make a big commitment there, and that's that's getting on for 600 people every night are supported in the mayoral a bed every night scheme. In terms of what else we do, we pay for emergency food cards in school holidays, which we give out to the districts. But this is scratching the surface, and I'm afraid combined authorities can do bits to help, but it's scratching the surface. What I can do is use my voice for change. I think the 2-child rule should be scrapped. I think the benefit cap should be scrapped.
So the 2-child rule that you only get child benefit for the first 2, yeah.
I think local housing allowance needs to always keep pace with inflation and the cost of housing, the freeze on it. That is the combination of these policies is what puts heads beneath the water and makes people unable to cope. And, you know, it just can't, I say it can't carry on. but maybe it can, I don't know. But there needs to be, because who will we get in Westminster and Whitehall, and what decisions will they make? What I observe is, having been down there, is I hear the debate that goes on down there. Oh, we'll be tough on benefits. We'll please the Daily Mail with this headline or that or other. And you then see the reality of what that causes. It's just a kind of way of doing politics that to me has run its course. There's dire inequality in this country. You know, we've seen the figures put out by the Joseph Rowntree Foundation recently. You know, this is something that we kind of need to sort of say cannot and should not continue in a country like ours. And I'm going to say it. If that means higher taxes on higher earners, then so be it. So be it.
That's not the direction that your party's going in nationally.
But I'm speaking for myself, and I do that in this job. I'm not always towing a line, and I do speak directly for myself. We should consider a wealth tax. You know, you look at some councils would be the last line of defence in communities, and if I could just say a word for them, and I know everyone wouldn't have a massive amount of goodwill sometimes for councils, but to me, having been in national government, looking at the world from the eyes of local government, the way they're treated by national government is really just totally out of order, really. You know, they cut councils to the bone to the point where they can't even do their statutory functions. And yet, when families are desperate and homeless, they're still at the door of the council. Here's the thing, when I say higher taxes on higher earners, council tax has not been revalued since it was set up in the early 90s. So you've got some people in some really expensive properties who are paying absolutely minor council tax compared to the size of their property, whereas people on lower incomes are spending a much higher percentage of their income on council tax. These kind of things just need to be called out. And then you need to get more money into the fabric of local services and local support. But what I won't accept is a general election where no one talks about the issues that you've just raised. You know, I look at what Sadiq Khan's done in London with free school meals for all kids, and I'm envious. I wish I could do it, because you get into every child then, don't you, with a policy like that? We are not funded to do it, and that's the challenge that we've got. But no child in Greater Manchester should be waking up or living the day hungry. It just shouldn't happen in a country like ours, but it is happening in a country like ours. The question is, what am I going to do, or what are we going to do about it? And I think we've just got to find our voice really in a really uncompromising way. I don't know whether the Deputy Mayor wants to say anything, Kate, because you used to run an organisation called the Child Poverty Action Group, didn't you? And what you used to deal with back in the day is not actually as severe as what we're seeing now, is it? But do you want to add to it?
Just briefly, and then we'll...
Yeah, I mean, I'll be really quick about this. I mean, our children deserve the best. They're our future. We should be investing in them. They don't get to make choices for themselves. We have to make the choices for them. And if parents can't afford to look after them properly, feed them, keep them warm, buy them the clothes they need, make sure they can have a social life with other kids. It's not just a luxury for kids to be able to go swimming or go off to visit relatives in another city or whatever at the weekend. That's essential for their development. And really, we have enough money in this country, like Andy says. We're a big, rich country with rich people. We just need to spend it better and get it to our children and our families to give them the best start in life.
Thanks, Kate. So moving from the local to the international, there's quite a few questions on the Gaza situation. First of all, do you support calls for an immediate ceasefire?
Yes.
Okay.
We said so in October, so it's not just recent.
Yeah.
To me, it was quite clear, and the other 10 leaders, by the way. So we issued a statement in, I think it was the second half of October. It was becoming quite clear that, while I think there is a legitimate reason to go after Hamas, what was being done looked disproportionate, and we said so at that time. So it's not about taking sides in a city region like ours, where we know we have a very big Jewish community, we have a big Muslim community. It's not for me to sort of take a side for and the last thing is ever to see this through a sort of political lens. It's only a humanitarian lens that you look at. Of course, they are justified in taking action against acts of terrorism, which were which were vile by anyone's reckoning, utterly atrocious acts of terrorism. Of course, that's justified. Of course, the hostages that were taken should be released. There's just no question about that as well. The issue for us was what was being done in respect of Gaza justified, and we believed, and still do, that it was disproportionate.
And do you support calls for Palestine to have recognised statehood as soon as possible?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Okay.
And I've supported that when I was a member of Parliament. Again, as part of a negotiated two-state solution. That's what we've got to get back to. And I think we need more leadership, don't we? From more leaders need to start. I think we're living in this era of social media. It just feels to me people take sides all the time, and I don't really see the same leadership on the world stage these days in saying, "Hang on, there's two sides here. Let's get a process of negotiation underway." It feels like we're in a very polarised time where people just take a side, they're one or the other. But leaders need to do something different. They're the ones that bring sides together, and I see a real lack of that on the world stage at the moment. So yes, I do support statehood for Palestine, but as part of a two-state solution.
And do you think there's a lack of leadership in your own party? I mean, you and I were both in Rochdale yesterday, where the by-election is going to be held at the end of the month. From my talking to people there, Labour is absolutely hemorrhaging support in the Muslim community because of Keir Starmer's refusal to call for an immediate ceasefire. Do you want him to go further?
Well, we obviously made our intervention when we did, because we wanted it to be clear from where we were what was the unanimous view of 10 leaders, and bear in mind they're not all Labour, one of them is a Liberal Democrat leader, as you know, and the Deputy Mayor, who's here, as I just said before, and myself. We felt it was right to make our position clear. I'm, in some ways, always wanting to provide a running commentary on positions in Westminster. I remember the whole Iraq situation. People should make their own positions clear and not play, not the politics of these things. Because the minute I say something like that, it gets into attack for the different reason and all the rest of it. I'm not going to do that. I just made we made our Greater Manchester position abundantly clear at the start, and I think we were right to do it, and we stand by it today.
I'm going to ask one question that we've got in about devolution, and then we'll open it to the floor for things that we've not covered or things you want to pick up on. It's about Keir Starmer, though. How have the conversations gone with Keir Starmer and other leading Labour members regarding the topic of devolution and further expansion of major city regions? Are you confident of progress in developing devolution?
We're making a lot of progress, actually, particularly since Sue Gray arrived. Do you remember Partygate and Sue writing that report? Well,
so she's
having done that,
is she the new Chief of Staff?
Yeah, and she's made a fantastic difference and is really thoroughly committed herself, having been in the Whitehall system. She's really committed to...
Is she a Northerner? Where's she from?
Sue, I think she's a Londoner, actually, originally. Oh, no, Northern Ireland, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but then I think lived a long time in London. She's been a real, in many ways, big support to us. I'm really confident, actually, that the power of devolution is being felt. And do we have any devolution sceptics in the room? Does anyone think that we still shouldn't go down this road as Greater Manchester? Is everybody broadly on board with it? I hope you would be if you're here.
Do we want less power?
But
no.
The thing is, and I've said this to people in the Labour, the truth of the matter is, without making it about Keir or anyone, Labour's always been too late to this. It has, though, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And in some ways, the Conservatives were there earlier. But the thing I say to the sceptics, and there are still sceptics in the Labour Party or the Labour movement, is hang on a minute, here's Greater Manchester. We have overturned one of the most, I would say, damaging legacies of the 1980s, the deregulation of buses, under a government of the other colour. We have done that as Greater Manchester. So the idea that we're not able to do anything and it's all a bit, well, no, actually. We've done something that we didn't do when even we had a Labour government. So I think what we're showing is we can do things, we can make better decisions at this level than are often made at the Westminster level. I think, the city region, in a difficult time, and it is a difficult time, but we're often a source of hope for people who say, well, look at what Greater Manchester is doing. That's better than everywhere else. So I just think we need to make the case now for really going at devolution in a big way. And here's...
What's top of the shopping list?
Housing, definitely.
Yeah.
good landlord charter with proper, proper sort of power and oomph behind it. Building council homes as well, as I think it was Darren was asked the question. But you'll be pleased to know if I'm re-elected in May, and I don't take anything for granted. If I am re-elected, I'm going to stop going on about yellow buses for a bit, and I'm going to become as obsessed with I have been with them with creating an alternative to the university route for young people growing up in Greater Manchester. The Greater Manchester Baccalaureate will be the obsession, the MBAC as I call it. And that is all about an equal path at 14 for kids who want technical qualifications and apprenticeship and work, as currently there is a clear path for those doing GCSEs, A-levels, UCAS, university. That is going to be the new obsession.
Well, we will look forward to it.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
Two quite quick questions have come in on social media. I'm going to ask them first and then to you guys. Aidan, why can't Levenshulme have Metrolink?
Alex! You expect one hospital pass per night, but I think we couldn't we? It's just, it has a train station, of course, but and not particularly accessible.
It'd be a bit of a diversion, wouldn't it?
It's a bit of a diversion. I think that's the challenge.
Yeah, very brief in a couple of sentences. So hopefully Aidan's still watching.
We can have a Metrolink anywhere. There's no physical geography restrictions.
Like
why? But actually, we built the Metrolink and expanded it innovatively as a GM region to target the areas where it was most needed in terms of depravity and getting people to employment and leisure and education and jobs. So it's all about business case and money. So there's a number of mass transit expansions, the technical word for it, that we're building up the business cases for, and by the end of this year we'll sort of get to that position where we narrow that down into a selection, and that includes, as people have obviously seen in the press, Stockport and Bolton and Middleton and Atom Valley. So that's where the focus will be in terms of the biggest return or business case.
Thank you. So probably not Levenshulme anytime soon then, it sounds like. And another transport question, Simon, will the B Network improve direct services to the hospitals in Greater Manchester? Where I live, Bromley and Stockport, you have to get 2 buses to get to Stepping Hill.
Definitely it will, and that's that will be a priority in the network reviews that I was talking about before. All hospitals in Greater Manchester should have a very comprehensive bus service around them. Absolutely, that's a mission for me as well. No, we've got to make the changes. The thing is, if you look at Greater Manchester very quickly, when you take the thing over, you will see that there's overcapacity on some routes. So look at Oxford Road is the classic example, and probably here to a degree, but Oxford Road particularly, bus after bus after bus, third full, quarter full. What we get when we control the system, we get the ability to take some of that overcapacity and put it into the underserved areas, or go via hospitals, schools, workplaces. So that will come through in the next 2 to 3 years of the B Network as we do these reviews. So we can't do it straight away, but the first reviews are starting to come through, aren't they?
Okay.
The nighttime economic pilot will be targeted around Bolton Hospital as one of those key areas that we're going to focus on in terms of that initial pilot. Okay. That is clearly an area that could benefit from, but still work to do, but that's the intent.
Thank you. Any questions in the room? I'm going to give people who've not asked one yet, if that's a bit, hopefully we'll get time for you. There's 2 ladies there. Do you want to, we'll take both of those questions and we'll keep the answers quite short.
I'll try my best.
And then we might be able to come back to you as well.
Thank you very much. I just want to bring up a recent report that's been published by the Women's Rights Network. It's called State-Sanctioned Sexual Assault. Women Pay the Price for Policing Beyond the Law report. I know it has been sent to the Deputy Mayor and the Chief Constable. Just for a bit of background, I will be quick. It's related to the National Police Chiefs Council policy that permits police officers to strip and search and even intimately search suspects of the opposite sex. While GMP haven't implemented this policy, which is great, it has undertaken a consultation that is not acted upon. And it has provided information to Manchester City Council that confirms female GMP officers will be required to search male suspects if they self-ID as a woman. Obviously, our police need to have the trust of women in Greater Manchester, and I don't understand why GMP hasn't thrown this policy out of the window. So I would like to ask your views on whether this policy should be implemented in Greater Manchester, and why have we not had this policy just thrown out?
Thank you. And lady behind, and then we'll take that.
So how can the Mayor protect the safety, privacy and dignity of women and girls when NHS trusts in the Greater Manchester region have removed women and girls' rights to single-sex wards? They have adopted something called Annex B to the single-sex policy, which allows men to self-identify as women and instructs the staff that work in the hospitals to place those men on female wards.
So on the policing question, I think Kate or Terry, I think we'll give you a direct answer on that. On the NHS question, I'll have to look at Annex B. I've not, if I'm honest with you, I'm not familiar with the detail of it, but I am a former health secretary, and what I would say, and it's similar, I guess, to policing, these things really need to be often they're an operational decision, aren't they? Because hospitals are at capacity, as we know, and there's not always the ability to implement the single-sex policy, single-sex accommodation policy in the way that hospitals would ideally want to do it. The specifics about Annex B, I'd have to read up. I'm afraid I'm not familiar with the detail of that, but I will follow that up. Terry, would you like to take the policing question?
So this is about transgender women officers being able to search cisgendered women. Is that the question? Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
it's a male officer that identifies as being able to search a female.
Yeah, so first of all, just around the guidance, and again, if you want to pick a chat up at the end, more than happy to. The NPCC, National Police Chiefs Council, is one of the national bodies. There's other things like the Police College, etc. They yes.
But yeah, if you don't mind.
So the NPCC, at the minute, they've withdrawn which you may or may not know, but for the rest of the guidance, we welcome the withdrawal of that guidance, and they are going to consider all the different options that we've had. As it stands at the minute, we're trying to deal with issues on a case-by-case basis. We're waiting for that national guidance so that we can have a look at it. And again, I'm happy to pick a chat up after. It's a really difficult area for us, if truth be known, trying to understand, balance all sorts of, different people's rights, different views, and truth being, whichever way we policy and decide, I suspect that, there will be very different polarised views around it. So what I can give you is assurance that we will be as involved as we can be with the NPCC national work. But I think it's right that the service across the country try and work towards one national policy so that there's parity to everybody wherever, and you don't get a postcode lottery around treatment. I can't say for sure tonight because the policy's been withdrawn and they're looking at it, and I think that's because of I don't know for a fact, but I assume that's because of lobbying and different people's views, which is a good and healthy thing that's happened.
I was just thinking, Terry, as well, there was always going to have to be an operational element, there, wasn't there? Because you won't always have the officers on, there's always got to be a discretionary side.
Yeah, there is, and again, big forces, we have a lot of different staff and a lot of choice, so some of our challenges aren't as big as perhaps your Cumbrias, that on any particular day may have X number of women, X number of men, different gender issues, etc. So at the minute, as it stands, we're awaiting to see what the national policy looks like. We'll be involved in that debate, and
operationally, we're dealing with things on a case-by-case basis and trying to balance the situation as it stands at that point. And it's very difficult to give a really clear answer on this because every single situation is different, and we've just got to balance it up. It is, in all honesty, it's a really tricky situation, and we get everybody's views on it. We will wait for that national policy, but if you want to pick a chat up after, I'm more than happy to.
Okay, thanks very much. There were some questions over on the other side. The two, Lee? I can't see. Just the two hands that are up. We'll take both questions.
Andy, James, I'm a journalism student at Salford Uni.
James.
I'd just like to ask you about Night and Day, because the City Council's been in court with it last week, and I've seen you at Beyond the Music and support a lot of music bands and music venues in Manchester. What are you doing to help and make sure that grassroots music venue still stays open and supports the nighttime economy in Manchester?
Thank you. Can we take the next question and then answer that
no
one?
problem.
I just wanted to come back to child poverty and what you said about no child having to go hungry. For a number of years, the boroughs across Greater Manchester, as you said, have been providing vouchers during the school holidays for children on free school meals to have that essential meal at least once a day during the holidays. With the Household Support Fund under threat and likely to be cancelled, a number of boroughs are saying they're no longer going to do those vouchers. Salford has committed to continue doing those vouchers over all the holidays, despite the budget cuts. But I was wondering what you could do from a GM level to support or persuade other authorities to continue maintaining it as a priority.
Yeah,
Thank you.
That's a good question.
Okay.
So on the first question, no, I'm, as you know, really passionate about Greater Manchester music in all of its in all of its forms, and particularly passionate about making sure we protect venues from the smallest, all the way through the system, and that includes night and day. The thing for me in this situation is I'm not a party to what's gone on, because obviously a resident complained, City Council have had to look into it, license, so there's just a thing that's been going on. What I can say to you, whatever the outcome of the process, I will move heaven and earth to keep night and day open. It's a simple way of describing it, because I believe in it. I'm a member of the Music Venues Trust Scheme, which is about community ownership of venues. You don't get a vibrant music scene like ours by allowing grassroots venues to close. So it's as simple as that, really. Sometimes some will naturally close and others will open, but a place like that is a really important part of our infrastructure in the Northern Quarter, and it should be supported. It might have to address some issues, and it might need to raise money to pay for soundproofing. I don't know, but all I can say to you is I will do whatever I can to make sure it stays open. Well done, Salford City Council, by the way. I mean, often you do the right thing, and you set a good lead, the mayor and yourself, councillors, in terms of the priorities that you set. And that's really noticeable to me. I do really notice it. Salford Council, the badges are heart. The spirit of Salford, isn't it? And but it is a council with a heart. I always really notice that, and the community organisations that are operational here. I kind of sense that always. This, for those who don't know, the government are about to stop a thing called the Household Support Fund, and that's been paying for the vouchers that we just heard about, the warm banks and all the rest of it. Does anyone think the cost of living crisis is over? Of course not. And what can I do? Well, I can use my voice to say that they really must keep that household support fund in place to deal with all of the issues that were raised earlier. And obviously there's a big budget coming up, and I think a lot of people, not just on my side of politics, on others as well, saying, no, this is no time to remove household support, because you're just condemning more kids to poverty if that funding dries up. But credit to Salford for sticking to your principles and finding ways of keeping it going.
Thank you. And we've got 9 more minutes. Question there. Lady in Green, you wanted to ask another one, didn't you? So we'll go these two. We'll take both.
Just going back to GMP, Andy.
Yep.
Just with all the negative stuff that's been in the media of late, are we still going to keep the pressure on GMP with wrongdoings and so on?
Yes, I mean, so obviously my job and the Deputy Mayor's job, who is day-to-day the PCC for Greater Manchester, we do two things. We have to support GMP with funding and support them more generally in terms of making sure that they're equipped to do the job. But we have to provide challenge. And issues were raised a moment ago about safety of women and girls in police custody, and we have a major report actually being undertaken on that very issue, because there were revelations last year around, or concerns were made about elements of police custody, and those are being looked at by Dame Vera Baird at the moment. So, we do that job with a great deal of seriousness, and I see some of the negativity that's around, but I'm just going to sort of say directly, we do not flinch from that job. I was a week into this job as mayor when a programme called Three Girls, which was a drama on BBC, and it was followed by a documentary called Betrayed Girls on the difficult issue of child sexual exploitation, grooming in Greater Manchester. And on the back of those programmes, a senior former detective of Greater Manchester Police said that investigations into grooming gangs were sort of shut down overnight, and everyone just sort of looked the other way. Now, I could have heard that and done nothing, because nobody was saying to me that I had to do anything, but I didn't do that. I set up a major independent review of the handling of child sexual exploitation in Greater Manchester that continues to do its work, and it published a report on Rochdale recently. When I look on social media and I see all this thing that I'm covering up or something, people can say what they like, can't they, on social media? All I can do is look you in the eye and say, I set up that review. Nobody told me to, but I did it, with the former Deputy Mayor's support and the current Deputy Mayor's support.
I totally agree. I've got the GMCA is brilliant, I've got to say. Sorry, voice on croaky there. Total thank you to Deputy Mayor. My case has been with yourselves, and if it wasn't for yourselves, it wouldn't have got anywhere. So personally, I've been put through 3 years of hell with GMP, and Teddy Woods will be obviously aware of that. I've seen letters to Beverly Hughes. So I'd like to see that it is followed through, because wrongdoings have gone on, and I'd like it maybe dealt with.
Thank you. Let's take the next question.
Just lastly, if I could, though, it's my job always and with Kate, always to look into things, and we don't ever do. Oh, that's awkward. But we don't do that. We look into everything, don't we, Kate? But I am just going to say, some of those issues I think relate to GMP in the past. There was things that were done, I think, under, let's say, previous leadership that have stored up cultural issues that needed to be addressed. In my view, they are being addressed by the current Chief Constable, the current Deputy Chief Constable, the senior leadership team. GMP is a different police force today than the one I first faced when I walked in the door as mayor, and they are taking a different approach to policing our communities. So, I've got great confidence, honestly, in the leadership of GMP. That's not to say that there are not difficult issues that arise that have to be dealt with head on and not shirked in any way.
Great. Lady in the front. Oh, and that chap there, and then I think we're going to have to call it a day. Thanks.
This is just back to housing. You were talking about bringing in some kind of licensing accountability scheme for private landlords. And I'm sure that you're aware that we've already had that in Salford, and it was called the landlord's licence, and people who had private rental properties, mainly I think around the Seedley, Langworthy, around that area, had to pay a licence fee to rent their properties. And for that, they were meant to be getting a service. They could complain if there was bad tenants. They were helped if people, were wrecking the properties, or they were unsociable, or people were complaining. It completely failed, the scheme. And the reason why it failed...
Can we hurry up for a question? Sorry, we've only got
sorry,
2 minutes.
The reason why it failed was because there was no actual resourcing going into it. I think it was one man and his dog, basically, and there was nobody to go out and do anything or do any of the checks. So if that's the case, and it was because there was lack of funding, if you were to do that again, where would the funding come for that team to train them?
Yeah.
It's a big ask to do it fairly. Where do you see the funding coming from? How do you see it working?
Let's take that last question and then...
It's a fair question, yeah.
Thanks. Hello, my partner's a highly skilled mental health nurse at Salford Royal, and commonly complains that some of the referrals from police to the hospital are sort of inappropriate, and it puts undue pressure onto the wards. I was just wondering what work's been done to sort of
Somebody's phone.
collaborate between GMP and mental health services to improve the kind of appropriateness of referrals and things like that.
It's a really, really important question, and I will come to the first question. But Kate, do you want, because there's a whole thing going on at the moment called right care, right place. Right person. Right care, right person, is it? Yeah, sorry. Do you want to say something about that, Kate?
Yeah, we're very, very concerned about this, that the police are not the right people to be looking after those who are in serious mental distress. And we know, for example, people who are suicidal say the last person they want to turn up, quite honestly, is a police officer. But nobody else is available to turn up. You know how stretched NWAS are, the ambulance service, taking 4, 5, 8, 10 hours to get to people. We know that the Mental Health Trust here in Greater Manchester absolutely strapped for cash, and the pressures on staff, like your partner, mental health professionals are put under immense pressure. So right care, right person is an ambition to get the police doing police work, healthcare workers doing healthcare work. If a child goes missing, that we make sure that the children's services and the council are able to look after that child properly. And that plan is being put together with all those different partners and the fire and rescue service, because quite often they have to help the police or the ambulance service get into a property. We're putting that plan together now. As Andy says, right care, right person. It's all over the country. It's not just here. I think everybody thinks it's the right thing to do. Everybody thinks it's going to be challenging, not least because we're not getting any more money to do it. But in the long run, we believe it will give a better service for everybody who is sometimes in a really desperate situation, and it will make working in hospitals. You know, you go into A&E, for example, now, Manchester Royal or Salford Royal. It's horrible, isn't it? It's the last place you'd want to be with a mental health crisis. And the police are sitting there for 4 and 5 hours with those people, wasting police time. And it's just the whole system is working completely the wrong way. So really interested to hear your question, and really interested about your partner's experience. If there's time afterwards, we'll try and hear a bit more about it, because we're determined to get this right and have a better service for people who really need the right person to look after them when they're in trouble.
Thanks, Kate. So Andy, last answer about landlords licensing. Who's going to pay for it?
It's a good question, and we're going to have to learn, because there have been landlord licensing schemes around, and some of them didn't work for the reasons that you gave. But what I've come to in my kind of 7 years so far as mayor, because it's coming up to 7 years, is that we're not going to move Greater Manchester forward without actually getting much more serious about housing standards, availability of truly affordable homes, and thinking differently about it, because it's fundamental to those kids that you're talking about. If you've not got a safe, secure home, you've not really got anything really in life, have you? If you've not got that base. And the sad thing is, we sold off all those homes in the 80s. A lot of them ended up in the private rented sector. A lot of them aren't particularly well maintained, and sometimes tenants aren't treated. We've ended up again in another essential thing has ended up in quite a bad place. So the positive is, and I've given some negatives out about the government tonight, but let me give them a sort of a positive here, a bouquet. I know you didn't expect that, did you? But they have actually had a commitment to devolution in Greater Manchester, to be fair. And we are moving soon to a single settlement like Wales and Scotland. So we won't get our money anymore in all these little bundles from all the different Whitehall departments with all the rules attached to them. We're going to get a sort of block of funding that we can spend differently and without having to kind of dance to the tunes of all the different Whitehall departments. And in that scenario, to me, it is absolutely essential that you move in the direction of prevention in a much more significant way, rather than paying to pick up the pieces of people like we've just been talking about, who were not supported at an earlier stage. You move in the direction of prevention, and what does that mean? Well, it means you get much more serious about housing, because housing is the foundation on which everything else is built in people's lives. So that's where the money comes from. We're going to have to be bold and back what we believe in, but that's how you put serious resource behind a Greater Manchester Good Landlord Charter. That's how we will make it work. I will perhaps be asking Sarah and Ben Fire Service to help us more with the enforcement and the inspection of properties that are a risk from a fire or people's health point of view. We're going to have to be clever how we ask our public services to support this housing mission. But it is going to be something of a housing mission. So, you know, I hear what you say, and it's early days, but I'm building a system of that kind. And I hope you can hear tonight, you know, got these powers over post-16 education. Again, that alternative to the university route. You know, the buses have gone under public control, but we now want to put the trains under public control as well and put it all under one banner. I think we went in a very wrong direction in this country in the 1980s, where the essentials of life were deregulated, sold off, privatised, you name it. So what we're trying to do is fix the fundamentals for people in Greater Manchester, the basics of life, transport, housing, you know, get things just working for people again. And that's where we go next on this Greater Manchester journey, to housing particularly, but those opportunities for our young people, because you talked about child poverty. 2/3 of kids in Greater Manchester don't go to university. 2/3 of kids don't take in secondary school what they call the English Baccalaureate, which are the university-favoured GCSEs, which schools try and... Well, schools have... You will know this. Ofsted judge schools on how many kids do those type of GCSEs. That is never going to work properly for a city region like ours. And we won't get where we need to be as Greater Manchester until every kid growing up here has hope that there's a path for them through school into a really good opportunity. The big difference, I'm sorry, Helen, this is the end of the sort of thing, but I grew up here in the Lee area, as you know, and I went to university from here, but then I came back wanting to work here in the 1990s, and I couldn't find anything. There was just nothing here. And like so many people, to get on, I had to go south, and that's what people did in that era. Greater Manchester today is different. There are employers here and there are jobs here that simply weren't there. If I go back to the early 90s, they weren't. People have come and invested in this city region, and there are opportunities. But at the moment, our kids can't see them. So there'll be kids in Langworthy, you mentioned, or Seedley, or wherever, Weast, or whatever. They look at the skyscrapers and they can't see how they go from where they are to there. They can't see a path. That's the next bit in our mission, I think. You give them a path. You say to them, you can get there, and this is how you will get there, and you will get those apprenticeships, or you will get those jobs. That, for me, is where we go next. Everyone growing up here with a path in life and an opportunity at the end of it. And I think we can do it. We are setting the way. We are leading the way. You know, everyone is looking at us. They're saying, well, Greater Manchester's doing it. Well, why can't other places do it? We've kind of shown we've got something going here. But I'm hoping that we do get a different government. I hope we do get real boost behind us, and that we can start to fix these fundamentals for people that are holding too many lives back in Greater Manchester. But I'm really heartened. Thank you, Helen, for hosting this so well. I'm really heartened that so many of you stuck it out tonight, and you've asked your questions in such a reasonable way. I'm interested in what we're trying to do. I think Greater Manchester is starting to fix politics in this country. That's a big claim, but I think it is, because we're building from the bottom up in a different way, making decisions closer to people, and let's just stick at what we're doing and keep building it. So, you know, we're on the right path, but there's a lot more to do. But let's take some encouragement for some things that we are doing right here in a world that doesn't often feel that way. But thank you very much indeed for coming, everybody.
Thank you, everybody, for your patience, for your great questions, for your civility. I hope you feel you've got some answers. I always say I could write a PhD in Burnhamology because I've heard him say everything so many times before, but I did not know that the clean air cameras were being used to detect crime.
So you learned something.
I hope you have too. So thank you so much for coming, and safe journey home.